Not great. How important do you think drivers are to this equation? I mean, whether you realize or not, you aren't on a driver's podcast right now, and that's the business that I'm in. So I'm a bit partial, but I'm curious, sort of like looking at it objectively. Like, how do you think drivers fit into this equation?
I mean, the myth about when Travis and I were running things is that we didn't care about drivers. It was the driver need base was changing every year in a big way.
Hmm.
It started with the full-time black car driver who then came over, who then sort of saw Uber as an income filler when they
Yeah.
didn't have clients by the hour or whatever. And then they transitioned over because it was so good and the prices were high and there was a lot of demand. And then when UberX started launched, it competed with Uber Black. So
Hmm.
you were sort of, you know, and if I were a black car driver, I'd be mad too. You're like,
Yeah.
hey, you introduced this low price product. People are now opting to do that, so they lost business. So that means either their price had to come down or something. So it was really hard to know what to do to grow the business and do right by the drivers. One of the first things I did when I joined Uber is create a driver loyalty program. Um, and we built sort of all these discounts that drivers would get, whether it was grocery. We did same day pay with Green Dot when I was
Yeah.
there. The
Yeah, no, I think
things
that
we,
launched in 2016. Yeah, Instant
yeah,
Pay, probably one of the most popular driver features
yeah.
ever released for sure.
And
And
we're the
Uber was the
first ride
first to
sharing
do that.
company in the world to do it, right? So we were focused on it, but it was changing, and that now 80% of drivers driving less than 10 hours a week.
Hmm.
It's a totally different driver base than it was even 5 years ago. So what I think is, you know, the one thing I struggle with, I guess, is the driver giving the driver the destination ahead of time and what that does to the user experience.
Yeah.
Um, I worry about because that creates a problem for the whole marketplace, which I think ends up hurting drivers and riders.
Hmm.
But I'm interested in your opinion on that.
Yeah,
But
I mean, Uber is pushing this pretty hard in California. As long as you accept 5 out of the last 10 requests, for example, as a driver, you can see the destination of where the passenger is going. And then in, I think, 20 markets, they're piloting this across the rest of the country. And I think obviously, if you ask drivers, they love this
of
because they
course,
get to see where they're going and when they're going. I think this is a really, maybe an inherent tension between Uber and the drivers that I'd love to ask you about. Because when you think about what drivers want, they kind of want as few drivers on the road as possible, as
yeah,
much surge as possible. And the companies kind of want the opposite, right? So as a driver, I want to know where every rider is going. But then as a driver, I'm also naturally going to cherry pick the best rides, and the service becomes more unreliable at an aggregate level, but on an individual level, I'm benefiting. So how do you sort of balance the two narratives? Like, I think this is something Uber has really struggled with. Like, what do drivers care about on an individual level versus like, hey, if you keep doing that and cherry picking all the rides, eventually people aren't going to take Uber and then there aren't going to be enough rides for you. But that's like a future issue. I got $50 that I need to make today, and I'm going to cash out instantly with Emil's product that you launched in 2016 and pay my bills, right? That's what I care about today. I don't care about the future. So how do you balance?
yeah.
How do you reconcile those 2?
It's a classic collective action problem
Mm-hmm.
where for me it's one thing versus collectively it may be hurting the collective. I think that there just has to be, some balance, and not every issue has to be balanced, but on
Mm-hmm.
balance, a driver needs to be satisfied with what they're making and the effort required to make it, and have it be feel like they're being fairly treated
Yeah.
and listened to. And ultimately, that's going to require some economic sacrifice on Uber's part, but it's also going to require some sacrifice on some of these featurey things
Yeah.
that drivers want, or else the whole system doesn't work.
Yeah.
And the other problem is because drivers churn so much, it's not like you're satisfying drivers and therefore they stay. They're churning because they're doing this as an income gap filler
Mm-hmm.
for most of them, not for a full-time job. So I have the most sympathy for the drivers who are doing this for their main income source.
Mm-hmm.
And is there a distinction? Maybe you could treat that category of driver with different benefits and different features than the casual driver.
Yeah.
I don't know.